where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's edition of the Security Squawk podcast. I can see the private chat is already fired up today, so you should see lots of giggles and smiles behind the scenes because that's what these two like to do. Why torture me in the private chat while we do the show. Besides that, today we're going to talk about a bunch of topics we got to get through. First one on the docket is this significant breach within the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, which, guys, is a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities even in the most secured government agencies face, in our government. This is the guys that make up the rules for cybersecurity and how to do it right, and they've been attacked. So we'll talk about the implication of this breach and what it means for national security. And then we'll jump over to the financial sector as we shift gears into recent ransomware attacks on EquiLend and Paysign, highlighting the relentless targeting of financial firms by cyber criminals. This theft of sensitive data in these incidents underscores the ongoing battle between cybersecurity measures and hacker ingenuity. So we'll talk about that and the interesting things that we learned about what happened in those attacks. It doesn't stop there. We got more for you. We're going in the Belgian village, back to that old brewery that we talked about last week. And Duvel Morgat Brewery and Kofi buyers are facing cyber attacks. What is that, Randy? A coffee wing of Duvel? Or is that what's going on there?
Something like that.
All right. Well, so there's not only do we have a major brewery, but we have a coffee producer dealing with cyber attacks, and we thought we'd bring that up. And we're going to talk about the legal ramifications of cyber attacks, spotlighted by a lawsuit in California filed against its managed service provider following a ransomware attack by the Black Bastard Group. This case, kind of opens up the discussion on accountability, who's responsible, and the complex relationship between businesses and their cybersecurity partners. And then finally, we'll wrap up this show with this alarming rise in malware attacks on small and medium-sized businesses and a trend that poses a significant threat to the backbone of the global economy. The sophistication of these attacks and the struggle of SMBs to keep pace underscores a critical security gap that we have in this country. That's an easy way of, or the nice way of putting what I say all the time on the show, that businesses are ill prepared for what's coming, and a lot of companies are about to get punched in the face. So we're going to dive into these topics and deep dive into what the heck is going on. We'll talk about CISA first. But before we do, remember, share the show. If you're watching us on social media, just hit that little share button, share it out with your friends, family, maybe write a little comment as to why this is a worthwhile podcast. If you have any questions while we're talking, drop them down in the comments section on social media. We usually see those as long as you give StreamYard permission. We can see those and answer those live if we see them. If not, we'll catch up with you later and we'll answer your comments later. Either way, anything that you do, share the show, comment, like, subscribe, whatever you can do helps us out, helps us continue to produce content like we're doing today. That's my rant. Sticking to it. Guys, we're getting into it. U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, or Security Agency, experienced a significant breach attributed to vulnerabilities with its Ivanti products. The event forced CISA to take critical system offline, revealing stark vulnerabilities within an agency at the forefront of the nation's cybersecurity defense. The breach exploit was ironically through software previously flagged by CISA itself, underscoring the perpetual cat and mouse game between cybersecurity entities and malicious actors. As we unravel the implications of this breach, we need to reflect on the complexities of safeguarding national cybersecurity infrastructure and the continuous evolution of cyber threats. This is an interesting one for me, guys, because it brings up, it brings up a lot of different points that we deal with in cybersecurity all the time. Number one, it's like, I see this all the time with big businesses. They think like, yeah, we invest some money in cybersecurity, and that leads them down this path of like what I would call false belief, in that they believe that they're protected. Like, so many conversations I've had over the years with big businesses, and they're like, yeah, we're this big company. We do the best we can. We have the best cybersecurity. They really don't, but that's what they believe. And like the way this article is kind of written, it paints the picture that CISA should be like above everybody else. Like, they should be the most protected. They should be the last ones, or should never be breached. What are your thoughts on that, guys? Because I think that's like just the wrong way to think about cybersecurity in general. Like, there isn't anything that, if it's connected to a network or the internet, there isn't anything out there that's hack proof or not hackable. It doesn't matter where it lives. If it's in my house or if it's in the offices of CISA, doesn't matter. What are your thoughts on this? Randy, you're muted. Andre, you want to talk?
Wow. I didn't realize I was muted. So if you're ready to go ahead. I can go after you, or I got some things to say too.
No, go for it.
I had a little bit of sneezing there. So there's a few lessons I think that are learned here. I agree with what you're saying. And, if I was going to say like cybersecurity 101, class 1, day 1, maybe day 2, you're going to talk about this assumption that the bad guys are already in, and that is to keep you from having this like one and done attitude. You don't like set it and forget it. It is an ongoing, evolving situation. The other lesson I think to learn here is that even the big guys, they overlooked these two servers. This is literally the cybersecurity arm of the government. I was also thinking while you were talking, maybe this could help lower the stigma a little bit. We talked quite a bit last year about lowering the stigma and, making it normal to be able to talk about breaches and stuff like that. Maybe this will help lower the stigma a little bit. Possibly.
Andre?
Yeah, for me, I chuckled when I originally saw the article, but in these huge corporations, especially something like CISA, where you have maybe one hand not talking with the other, but you would think that as soon as these type of updates happen, there's like a boardroom meeting where everybody's just making sure they check the mark. But it's very possible that the people that's in charge of this didn't even know about the updates that needed to be done, or this particular breach. So you have like the researcher that's putting it out to the web versus the hands-on person who may not have even known and read the bulletin that CISA provided.
Yeah, one hand's not talking to the other, or however you want to say that, but definitely a case of that going on here. I mean, when you put out a bulletin and you don't patch or get rid of the vulnerability that you've put out yourself, but it also paints a picture of like the complexity of doing something like vulnerability management in a large organization. Like, maybe it's just not that easy, to either. Look, at the end of the day, you have two choices when it comes to vulnerability, right? Patch it and remove the vulnerability, or isolate and or retire the piece of hardware or software that has the vulnerability. Those basically are your two choices when it comes down to it. And that might not be an easy decision. If there's no other solution outside of Avanti for them, then what are they going to do? They can't move away from it. They can't retire it. And who knows how easy or hard it was to deploy the patch. Could also be that we were just dealing with somebody who wasn't aware that they needed to do anything. Who knows? And you don't think that these things would happen in CISA, but the whole point of us talking about this is they do.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking some of the best cybersecurity experts in the world. But also at the end of the day, it's still a government agency, so sometimes government agencies aren't the most efficient. So boom, chalk it up for that too, I guess.
You said it, not me. All right. Anything else we want to discuss on that, guys? Do you guys see any like impact outside of, what do you see any impact here to CISA or U.S. infrastructure as a result of this?
What did they get? Did they get into anything? They were breached. Did any kind of data flow out? I doubt these were just, like Minecraft servers. They probably had important information on them. So yeah, there could be all kinds of implications. Source codes, Yeah,
they're not announcing too much information. So, somebody can probably FOMA it. But we'll see. We'll learn more as this goes on, but it's interesting. All right, second topic up on the docket. I got ransomware attack in the EquiLend and Paysign. So the financial sector remains that lucrative target for cyber criminals, gentlemen, and as demonstrated by the ransomware attacks on both EquiLend Holdings and Paysign. These incidents highlight the sophisticated tactics employed by attackers such as the Lockbit ransomware group to compromise sensitive employee and consumer information. This breach at EquiLend resulted in the theft of personal data, including Social Security numbers, underscoring the devastating impact of such attacks on privacy and corporate security. And Paysign's experience further exemplifies the growing threat to the financial services industry, prompting a critical analysis of cybersecurity practices within the industry. Guys, I mean, in the last 3-4 months, this industry, especially these types of providers with loans and mortgages, are really getting hammered. I mean, it's just wild. And just considering what these companies hold in terms of their data sets, I just think of, I haven't bought a house in a long time, but I just think of all the information I had to divulge when I was buying my house. That is all stuff that's being stolen by these cyber criminals. So just put that into perspective. Like, imagine that whole big thick file that you had to give a mortgage lender when you were applying. And a lot of people probably don't even remember everything that they give because it's done in such a short period of time. And, when it's done, it's kind of done. You know what I mean? And you don't remember, like, you gave, tax returns, paycheck stubs. You may have had to give some kind of letter or something like that if you own a business, or, there's all kinds of requirements when you go to apply for a mortgage, and you give up all kinds of information, credit reports. That's all kept in a file. And that's what's being breached here. And that's the reality of this situation. So these ransomware groups, they're going after they're targeting the loan operators and the people that are giving the loans in the financial sector. It doesn't matter if you're in real estate or you're in but these companies that give loans, cyber criminals have said, wow, these companies have massive amounts of data. It's like, if data were gold, this is platinum to them.
Yep.
That's the best way I could put it.
And
go ahead.
Well, they're saying that there's no other signs of other data leaving the network. And so we're talking a few hundred employees, but this, like you said, this being platinum, this is platinum because they can take the information that they get here and collaborate it with other information that's been leaked to do some serious targeted, spear phishing, if you will, phishing attacks. that are going after individuals that will be very hard to see that if they're real or not. So this, like you said, it's platinum for sure.
Yep. Come on, Andre, give us your thoughts.
No, we're good on that one.
Oh, good. Don't want to
Yeah.
talk about mortgages and breaches, my man. All right, so we'll move right along. Then Andre's feeling under the weather, so you might not hear him talk a lot today. So we're not excluding him from the show in any way. So just to give y'all heads up on that. So Randy, this is like up your alley. This is a story you wanted to talk about, but man, these things not going well in Belgium for at least the breweries and this coffee roastery now, who's been added to the list of cyber criminals or cyber criminal victims. So we have Duvel Morgat Brewery, which we talked about last week, was hit. Now we have this coffee buyers, and they faced an unusual series of cyber attacks, marking a disturbing trend of targeting local businesses with international reach. These incidents underscore the broad spectrum of cyber threats facing industries today, extending from global corporations to local enterprises. The geographic and temporal proximities of these attacks raise questions about targeted vulnerabilities and the need for heightened cybersecurity awareness across all business sectors. So I don't know. I know for guys like us, this is kind of like, yeah, no kidding, right? And we talk about this all the time on the show about how cyber criminals are pretty calculated these days with who they attack and who they don't, right? I guess the best way I can describe it, guys, is there's two types of cyber criminals. Well, there's one cyber criminal that may act in two different ways on your business. Mm-hmm. They may do what we call the drive-by, which means they just collect information about you or a vendor, or they use your business to get into another bigger fish, so to speak. And they do that through various ways, which I'm not going to get into in detail right now. And then there's the attackers that attack and then do things like ransomware on that particular business, right? So you could get hacked and not even know it, or you could have been the reason that somebody else got hacked, because there are these like what we call drive-by cyber criminals out there who they're not out there to deploy ransomware on every business. They just, use that business for its gains and move on to maybe another business and hit them. But when you're looking at like these smaller businesses and they're like, oh, well, this is a smaller company in Belgium, right? But look, they distribute their products all over the world, right? And that's a big deal. Like when you're talking about, a small business in the Netherlands, but they distribute their products throughout the world, that's a massive target for a cyber criminal because they know they can disrupt your supply chain. You can't deliver your product to where it needs to go. And I'm sure that there's a pretty good lead time in like when you produce your product to when it actually hits the store shelves that bought your product. So whether that be 2 or 3 weeks, whatever. But cyber criminals know this. They know that they can take advantage of that. And they know that you don't want a disruption in what shows up on the shelves at the stores that your product's supposed to be in. And they use all that leverage to get you to pay. Thoughts on this, guys? Go ahead.
So no more just for clients just to say, hey, I just make coffee. Who cares? No cyber criminal wants to come after me. What are they going to do? Steal my beans?
Yeah. It's funny. So Andre's making that joke, but it's one of those jokes that comes out of us hearing time and time again, year after year, different business owners saying, I'm too small to get hacked, or, what are they going to do? Steal my, fill in the blank. But this is an international coffee company. They have employees in 5 different companies. They're the largest coffee company in Belgium. Crazy thing is they're literally a mile down the road from Duvel. So you've got a giant Belgian brewery and you've got a giant Belgium coffee company basically getting hit at the same time, which it's not unheard of. We've seen it, but it is rather unusual. And it did, maybe these guys wouldn't have made the news. I don't know, but it definitely made it news because they are so close.
Somebody
We said
must be dropping USB drives on the parking lots around there.
Well, that's what I was wondering, So is somebody doing something like that, straight out of Mr. Robot, But we talked about last week, people say, well, I'm too small to hit. It's not that you're too small to hit. Every business has valuable data. You just might be too small to make the news.
Yeah, I mean, definitely something we want to keep our eye on and see if this story doesn't develop a little bit more. And if it does, we'll definitely bring you the update. So moving right along, guys. We got this interesting article, and it's, for our friends in the MSP space who watch and listen to our podcast, this might be interesting for you more than others. But I think this should be interesting for most businesses out there, especially if you outsource your IT, work with an outside provider like an MSP or IT consultant or whatever name you call them. This is becoming more and more of a thing, that what we're about to talk about. And this is this law firm that sues their MSP over the Blackbuster ransomware attack. And we've talked about Blackbuster on this podcast plenty of times. But this lawsuit has emerged in the wake of a ransomware attack with a Sacramento-based law firm. The law firm's name is Mastagni and Holstead, and they're taking legal action against its managed service provider. Now, like, the last thing in the world I would want as a managed service provider is taking on law firms as a client, them getting hacked, and then them basically having free law help to go after me. I mean, they basically can use their own internal team to go after this MSP, which go luck to the MSP. The MSP's name is Landtech, and the case highlights the intricate web of accountability in cybersecurity breaches and raises important questions about the responsibilities of MSPs in protecting their clients from cyber threats. I mean, this is nothing new for the three of us. We talk about this in our mastermind groups all the time, but I don't think it's a prevalent conversation with a lot of MSPs, guys. And the lawsuit revolves around a failure to prevent an attack by the Blackbuster group, leading to significant operational disruptions and financial losses. And the legal battle may set a precedent for future cybersecurity litigation and emphasize the critical need for clear agreements and robust cybersecurity measures between businesses and their MSPs. Wow. So there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. I don't know how much time we want to spend on this. But what are your thoughts on this? Just top level. What are your thoughts on MSPs getting sued by their clients because the MSP purportedly didn't do their job or didn't protect them adequately enough? What are your thoughts on businesses doing this?
But who was to say that the MSP, the MSP should never guarantee that they're going to completely protect their clients? So I don't know if that MSP had something on their website or just said something like, oh yeah, don't worry, this is going to cover you. This firewall that we're going to install is going to protect you. And maybe that's what this law firm is basing it on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, it really depends on the relationship. You're 100% right, Andre. What are you going to say, Randy?
Well, I mean, and they're a law firm. And so, I mean, they probably sat down. They had to pay that huge ransom to get their data back.
Yep.
It appears that some of their credentials had been leaked online, somebody's credentials, and then those credentials were used to delete the backups. So, they're probably sitting around after the fact and saying, well, how could we get this money back? And then they go, well, let's just sue the MSP. Let's sue. They're also suing Acronis. So, there's a pretty good section at the end. I don't want to steal away your thunder, but there's a pretty good section at the end about advice for MSPs that it's probably good to discuss that before we move on, but we can go there when we get there.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, guys, I mean, with this particular incident, I mean, we know, I guess my thought process here around this is, we know, the three of us, because we talk about this all the time, we know the risk out there that businesses have with their MSP. We know MSPs, for the most part, there are a lot of businesses out there in relationships with MSPs where it's kind of like, I compare it to like a couple that's like just on the verge of divorce. Like they're still hanging around each other. They see each other, but they're not really talking, right? Or if they're talking, they're not talking about the things they need to be talking about. They're talking about switches and tech, right? As we say, they're not sitting down and talking about risk. And that could be because the business doesn't want to have that conversation for various reasons. One of those is because businesses know if they bury their head in the sand, they can't really be held responsible. That those days are coming to an end. So that attitude will shift. The other piece of it is the MSP is afraid to have the conversation because, for fear of maybe losing the business, for fear of maybe being looked at as like they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing or what they're being paid to do because nobody ever had that conversation. So there's this mutual mystification, as I call it, between the MSP and the business, where the business thinks the MSP is doing all these things and the MSP isn't. And then when an attack like this happens, a lawyer's office is sitting around going, well, you were supposed to protect us, and the MSP sitting there going, no, you weren't paying us for that.
Right.
But that is usually because nobody's sitting down and reviewing the contract and the agreement. And the other piece I'll give you on this is like we have a pretty tough agreement in terms of like it protects our company from a lot of things. And we get a lot of pushback on the agreement, initially, because there are a lot of things in there that protect our company. And it can feel very one-sided if you don't really know what you're looking at or reading. So we take the time to go through the agreement with clients to make sure that they understand it and that it's not like we're in the business of writing checks all day because we screw up. It's just to protect us in the event of something like this happening, a rare ransomware event. But at the end of the day, as somebody said earlier, I think it was Andre, like you can't be going into a relationship telling somebody you're going to prevent them from being hacked. You can't do that, right?
That's right.
That's malpractice. So you need these agreements. But my point is, just based on the fact that when we present an agreement and the reaction we get from people when we put it in front of them, I would say it's still a significantly high number of people who look at our agreement and go, potentially go, I'm not signing this, or I have a problem with this. But then they learn that like, this is kind of like how MSPs work today. Like we need to protect ourselves. My guess is this MSP, Landtech, probably had one of those like legacy agreements where it didn't have all the protections that you need today in today's day and age when you're servicing these kind of clients. So the lawyers probably looked at their agreement, looked at what it says, and said, there's nothing in here that says, I'll give you an example. One of those things is third party risk is a big or third party causing a problem on your network, whether that be your own employees or somebody else that you hire to come in and do something on your network. Think of like your copier company, right? They might come in and install one of those big copiers that connect to your network, right? But if they don't maintain that system, or you don't contract your MSP to maintain that system, and something bad happens as a result of that system having a vulnerability or what have you, ultimately the MSP could be held liable if they don't have language in their contract that says we can't be responsible if you have a third party come in and they do something that causes you to be vulnerable. And that would apply in that case here. But if you don't have that in your contract at all, you're going to be held on the hook as the MSP. So I think it's important for businesses to understand this, because they have to understand that, like, you're either taking on a massive amount of risk with the relationship you have with your MSP, or you're assigning that risk to the MSP now. And you need to know kind of what you're assigning to the MSP and what you're not. But if, from the flip side of this, guys, if the MSP doesn't have a good agreement, the MSP is taking on all the risk.
Right.
So,
also, I was just doing a little between the lines, I guess. This is a law firm that has 42 lawyers. So there's probably another, I don't know, let's just say 20 to 40 support staff, easy. I mean, you're not talking a little bitty business here. I mean, and this, I don't know. It just doesn't smell good. It seems like they're probably, I don't want to comment anyway, get in trouble. But some things seem like they might be a little obvious. Do you want to look at that section about advice for MSPs? I know you kind of covered some of it already.
Go ahead, read it off.
Well, so they do have some advice down here, and I thought, man, this is really good advice. First one is, do you have a solid contract? You were just talking about that. Like, what kind of limitations and of liability are enforceable under the contracts? Are you running off a handshake or a brother-in-law deal, from 25 years ago? Do you have a contract in place? Are roles and responsibilities relative to information security clearly identified in the contract? Does your target customer base bring extra liability potential to the table? Look at some of these industries we've been talking about, especially the ones that are getting hit more often. Are your customers educated on cyber liability and doing enough to protect themselves? You were just talking about that right now. We call that eating the risk sandwich sometimes. Is the MSP just basically eating the risk sandwich on a wing and a prayer? Or are they, have they actually talked about it to the client? Is the client educated? And does the client know how they can protect themselves? And then what do you know or don't know about your subcontractors? And guys, we've seen that come up time and time again. I think the first big one that I remember was in a FTC fine, or it might have been an SEC fine. I think it was an SEC fine they gave to a bank just because the bank didn't properly vet their vendor. But that's something that's very important. Your vendors, your subcontractors, you really need to know what's going on with them. And that's very important, because you could be held liable for it if they're not doing the right things.
Yeah. I could go on for like half the day on not doing the right things with MSPs, especially from one thing that we just went through in the last week with another MSP working for a company, and God, the stuff they were recommending, like, it was mind-boggling. It was like, why are they recommending that, right? But it just goes to the point, like, that business could invest in those tools and they have no idea why, but they're being told by somebody that they are supposed to trust, here's what you need, right? But if those tools, like you just said, Randy, if those tools don't fail to protect you, who's liable? Like, the business thought they bought this great, tech stack that's going to protect them, because that's what the MSP said to buy. Here, they sold it to me. They raised my prices, 70%, gave me this cybersecurity protection, and we still got hacked. Right? It happens all the time. Right? You need to understand. You said the business owner needs to be educated. First off, they need to want to be invested in the process. They do need to be educated on why they're buying the tools they're buying and how it actually protects their business. And then they make the decision on whether or not they invest in that tool or not. They shouldn't be told to do something and just do it because somebody told them to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So you got a rattle coming from your underneath your car, and it's coming from a wheel well, and somebody tells you to put in some fuel treatment. I'd be like, well, what? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that, right? So, Andre, anything?
I mean, this is I was just Google. I know you can't judge a book by its cover, but a lot can be said by their website. And their website looked like it was, in the 1990s. And So this is a
You're talking
classic.
about the Lantec?
Yeah, Lantec. Yeah. So this is a classic where an MSP versus an MSSP, where you have, you know, the guy who knows IT, and maybe he landed a nice, well client law firm saying, yes, I can do all of these things, but then he was, you know, most likely way over his head as far as.
I'm thinking that the conversation wasn't even had. You know what I mean? That's kind of like what I said at the beginning. It's just they probably just never had the conversation with the client, and the client got hit, and now it comes to this, right? So we'll see. We'll learn more because it's going to go out. It's going to go
Yeah, it's
to
public.
it's going to go out there, and we'll find out what ends up happening. Unless the MSP decides to settle, then we'll kind of know, but we'll never really know the details.
Hopefully they had insurance.
Hopefully. All right, guys, wrapping it up here, bringing it in with the last topic as we dovetail off of like, hey, your MSP might suck, but because of that, your small business increasing malware attacks on SMBs. These small, medium-sized businesses are facing an unprecedented wave of malware attacks, struggling to keep pace with the sophistication of cyber threats. Man, we've been saying this for years on this channel. I mean, do we really need a report from somebody to tell us what we already kind of know? But another report highlights the triple threat of info stealers, ransomware, and business email compromise attacks, which have left SMBs particularly vulnerable. The findings point to a disturbing trend where nearly half of all malware detected on SMB endpoints were designed to steal sensitive information. This segment discusses the unique challenges SMBs face in the cybersecurity, the critical importance of adaptive defense strategies, and the broader implication for global business community. So let's talk about this, guys. Like, what we already know that there's these increasing vulnerabilities of SMBs to cyber threats, but let's talk about like why in your mind, but give me one reason why you think, like, we've been talking about this on this show almost since the beginning of the show, that there's a lot of vulnerabilities, there's a lot of risk, and businesses are slow to act. And it's still that way. And we're 3 years into this podcast. So what are some increasing vulnerabilities to SMBs that you're seeing as a result of this? I mean,
well, so first you said why, and I always quote my history professor who always said one of the things you got to do to understand history is follow the money. So why is there more malware that's targeting data? Because there's money in it, and you could be in your hoodie in your mom's basement and write some malware that did some weird thing, or a criminal could write malware that steals data. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No, you made a great point, but what you just said there reminded me of an article I read. It was either this week or late last week. But so real quickly, I was reading this article, and basically what it was a software company was accusing Rapid7, which is a cybersecurity company, and they do a lot of different things around cybersecurity. But they have a threat hunting team, and threat hunters basically go out and look for bugs in software, and they should responsibly disclose it and allow the company time to patch it and fix it, and get that patch rolled out and implemented before they go and kind of announce it to the world that, like, hey, we found this vulnerability. I have my own kind of opinions and thoughts at this point on vulnerability disclosure. I believe that, threat hunters and vulnerability disclosure has almost become like a competition, and that needs to kind of change, in my opinion, because these guys that find vulnerabilities, they wear it like a badge of honor, like, hey, look what I found, and they want to get it out there as quickly as possible for ego-driven decisions. They're not doing it to serve a community, to make people more protected. They want to see their goddamn name on a piece of paper and kind of be in like the Hacker Hall of Fame or something, which doesn't really exist. But that's the attitude a lot of these guys have that I see. And I see it from both sides. I see it from companies who need to deal with these, vulnerabilities. And I also see it from the guys who are out there basically doing work for free, looking for bugs and finding bugs. But the interesting thing about this case with Rapid7 was they reported this vulnerability to this software company. And basically, like 3 days after the company patched it, which they didn't really have time to verify the patch and like do all the things that you would expect and afford a software development company to do. Like they gave them like 3 days, and then Rapid7 wanted to go disclose this publicly. Now, why I bring this up is Rapid7 also provides incident response services, right? And what we know that happens is when a vulnerability is disclosed to the public, hackers jump all over that immediately and try to exploit it like crazy, as we see with the ConnectWise vulnerability. So you can't have it both ways, in my opinion, with Rapid7. And it was very disheartening to read what they were trying to do. And I don't know why they were trying to do it, but it seemed to me like they were trying to create business for themselves. And this goes right along with what you were saying, Randy. Like it seemed like they were like, hey, we found this. We're going to give you time to fix it. But we're not going to give you that much time because we want to get it out there so we can make money on, people getting hacked and remediation. That's what it felt like to me. And I don't know, that's crazy. But it lends to what you said there. Like that is like a hidden threat that businesses don't realize exists in this ecosystem.
Right.
Right. Is like vulnerabilities being spread faster than businesses can deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And who's to say a cybersecurity company who finds vulnerabilities but also provides remediation services isn't, doing these things to increase their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
We have yet to deal with the scams and unethical practices that cybersecurity companies employ.
Right.
And I'm no idiot. I'm never going to sit here and say every cybersecurity company operates at a extremely highly ethical level. No, because there's publicly traded companies out there that run cybersecurity programs for businesses, and their mission is not to protect businesses. Their mission is to enhance the value to their shareholders.
Yeah.
So, thoughts, Andre? SMBs?
No, I'm good. Go ahead.
Oh, good. All right. I know
I'm about to take my pill here.
Oh, they look big. Too big.
I have a thought on what you were just saying.
Go ahead, hit it.
Well, so there's been many, many times when we are involved in a remediation, when we've come across other companies that are hacked. Maybe usually it's a company that was hacked and sends out an email, because their server, their 365 gets commandeered. And so they send out an email to a company that ends up reaching out to us because they got hacked. And we've never really ever gotten a response when we've reached out to these other companies that are hacked. I think they automatically assume that we're the hackers or that we're just in it trying to profit off of them, when really what we're trying to do is put a better buffer around our now new client usually. But yeah, we've fallen on deaf ears whenever we've reached out to, hey, you reached out to this company. The only time we've seen where it wasn't was a company that was talking to us that had been hacked because of another company. They replied back to the other company and said, yeah, we're going to get our lawyers involved. And then all of a sudden that other company got super cooperative. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of suspicion out there regardless with a lot of companies when it comes to this stuff.
And rightfully so. But it's just the point. It's just another vulnerability that SMBs have to deal with in this whole cybersecurity, situation that these businesses are in. I mean, the cybersecurity posture of most SMBs, in my opinion, and the reason that they're getting attacked is like, one of the things we wanted to talk about in this segment is like what SMBs can do to kind of improve their cybersecurity posture and reduce the chance of them getting hit with malware. And quite frankly, I just feel like where businesses are at, just generally speaking, speaking with a broad stroke here, businesses just need to do something because most businesses are doing nothing. Does anyone disagree with that?
Wow. No.
So,
We live by a very, very large outlet store mall. It's one of the most successful ones in North America. It gets 5 million visitors a year. It's also the hottest spot in Texas for stolen cars. And they're not going in there and, smashing these cars and ripping open the insides and all this jazz. They're just walking around seeing what's not locked and seeing which ones are easy to steal.
yeah.
And, the example there is with a business that's happening all the time. Your defenses are getting probed nonstop. And if you can do even something, you're better off than most businesses, although none of us would be comfortable with saying, well, only do something, but hey, if you were doing something, you're still putting yourself in a better position than a lot of businesses are. And it's quite disturbing, actually.
Yeah. The problem is that if you're doing nothing or you're doing very little, the biggest risk to your business right now is, cyber criminals, but also the clock's ticking. The more the more you wait, the longer the clock runs, the more expensive it's going to get for you. I know this sounds cliche, but the more expensive it's going to get for you. And the two clocks that are running against you are basically the clock of you're probably going to get hit at some point if you do nothing. The cyber criminals are going to get you. And then the flip side is that the government's coming with compliance. And most compliance frameworks and most compliance that I've seen takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to implement.
They take a minute.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's not like you can hire somebody and in a month you're going to be compliant.
That's right.
A lot of businesses think that because we get those calls and like, hey, if we hire you, how quickly can we be compliant? It's like, that's going to be like a year from now or 18 months from now. And they're like, what? Well, yeah, you heard it here first. If you didn't know, it's going to take you a while to get up to where you need to be so you can, handle the compliance regulations being thrown your way. So be forewarned. If you're not in tune to this stuff, if you don't know, you should know now. All right, boys, I got to run. I got a meeting I'm late for by 3 minutes. So I'm going to end the show. Thanks for your input. We'll see everybody next week. Stay safe out there.
Sure, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.